Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Good Stuff. My name is Kevin Bille, and as always, we appreciate you joining us here today. Well, we've got somebody right up the road joining us today, Jamy Bechler. He is an author. We're going to touch on a couple of his books, but mainly his new one, The Captain, which just came out. And as you can tell, he is the host of the podcast, Success is a Choice. Jamy, what's going on?
Man, Kevin, appreciate you having me. I love your show. I mean, literally, you have one of the best titles of a podcast ever. Good stuff. I mean, it is good stuff. I love listening to it. And being a former basketball coach myself, I love the guests that you have on because a lot of them are coaches or a lot of them are people that I would have listened to as a basketball coach. So literally good stuff, my man.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But man, you're making my 6-year-old sign look a little bad today with your background. I'm going to have to update the whole thing here and just get it plastered. But hey, you mentioned the coaching. I want to go right into that, Jamy. That's just a commonality. And I think we have a lot of them, to be honest with you. Take me back to your coaching days. Why did you become a coach in the first place?
Yeah, great question. And I was in 7th grade and I had this English teacher that was the stereotypical, scary English teacher that everybody hates, probably because she was too good and she was too demanding. And, now that I'm in writing, now that I'm writing books, I really wish I'd paid more attention to her. Right. She's a lot smarter now than she was back then. And I wish I'd paid attention. But in 7th grade, I have Mrs. Shannon, and she has this library in her classroom, in the corner of the classroom. And one day she said, "Hey, you might like this book. It's about sports." And it was a John Wooden book. They Call Me Coach. Mm-hmm. And I read that book, and I would love to say, that I was this advanced 7th grader and I read this book and it was like all of a sudden this aha moment. And man, I want to be a coach like John Wooden. It wasn't quite like that until later on. But what I got from that book was it was the first time that I saw a coach who cared about his players, whether they were playing or not, whether they were a star or not a star. He cared about the players. He connected with the players. And that made sense to me as a kid. I was like, that was kind of eyes opening, my eyes open to the first time of, hey, there are coaches out there like that. I want a coach like that. Now, I wish I could have said that, man, I want to be a coach like that. But that was the first time I realized that there were coaches out there that could make a difference in a kid's life. And I had coaches certainly in 6th grade and 7th grade who I liked that were cool. But a lot of them, quite honestly, if the ball was going in the basket, they were high-fiving you. And if the ball wasn't going in the basket, they were kind of yelling at you. Right. And so I like this idea, this concept of connecting with kids and respecting kids and loving kids. And so then that just kind of snowballed through the years. And I started looking at coaching a little bit differently. And eventually, the NBA thing didn't work out. And so, but actually I learned that very quickly that the NBA thing wouldn't work out. So, and I ended up deciding I wanted to be a coach, and I thought it would just be, the stereotypical history teacher, basketball coach in high school. So I go to college, and that's the first time I realized that you can coach college without really being a good player. So I did play in college, but I wasn't very good in college. I was decent in high school. I was good in high school, not very good in college, but I realized you could be a grad assistant. And, you could take off in a college career. So that's what I did. I went to Kent State to be a grad assistant. And then just from there was an assistant for a couple more years at Anderson University on the men's side. And then I got a break and went to be a head coach in the women's game down in Texas. And so I stayed in the women's game after that, coaching at a number of different places and being a head coach for most of my career.
2 quick follow-ups. Has Mrs. Shannon read any of your books? Have you sent her any?
Yeah, Mrs. Shannon, in the last day, we had her. She gave out postcards, and those postcards were stamped, and it had her address on it. And she said, "One day I want you to send me this postcard and let me know how you're doing." And wow. I said, "Mrs. Shannon, I will never send that postcard to you.
That's cool.
Never. When I'm done here, I will never be in touch with you again." And then about 6 years later, I sent her that postcard, and then I thanked her in my first book. Yeah. And she sent me a note before she died last year. She sent me a note that said, "You didn't turn out too bad for a kid who never wanted to pay attention in English class." So
that's really cool.
That meant a lot to me.
Yeah, for sure. And then the second thing is just a personal thing. I had to tie my shoes a certain way because of John Wooden and putting on the socks and shoes that my dad would make me do. And I'm now trying to get my kids to do that today. So that's funny how it comes full circle. Jamy, what made you get out of coaching? You know, you and I have been talking about some things in our similarities. And just before we got on here, how long I've been out. What made you get out? Was there something that you just knew it was time? Were you wanting to do something else? Fill us in a little bit on that, please.
Yeah, great question. I wish I had a great answer other than I thought I wanted to be an athletic director. So I've always wanted to be in leadership. Coaching was all I ever wanted to be. But when I was in coaching, I was like, all right, is there a way to have a bigger impact on more people? Obviously, you can go deep with your basketball team. But I thought, hey, can I make more of an impact on more kids at one time? And maybe I can do that as an athletic director. And so I really wasn't looking to get out of coaching when I did. I had, at the time, I was at Martin Methodist College in Tennessee and all-time winningest coach there. We had done some really good things there. We had everybody coming back off of a nationally ranked team. So everything was looking good. And then I had this opportunity approach me kind of out of the blue to be an athletic director at a large athletic department in Indiana at a high school. And I hadn't really considered being at the high school level, but the school called me. They approached me about being their athletic director, fifth largest gym in the world, seats over 7,000. You think of Indiana basketball, Nobody's won more boys basketball state titles than this school, Marion High School in Indiana. And so they approached me and, quite honestly, I wasn't ready to give up coaching, but I thought if I was going to go into administration, I needed to jump when I had the opportunity, and the pay was almost double, and it was a basketball school. So we went ahead and made that move. I'd like to say that, I'd done everything I wanted to in coaching. I've always not necessarily regretted leaving coaching, but there was always that, hey, I left this team behind, and I don't think I did it the wrong way necessarily, but I did leave kids behind that I really liked. And you're always going to leave kids behind, but we had a great team coming back. So I wasn't quite ready to give up coaching, but I was able to establish some student athlete leadership stuff. We were able to do a lot of things at that high school, and we were able to impact a lot of kids, maybe not as deep as being a coach. And quite honestly, that was one of the reasons I got out of administration then too, was because you certainly could affect kids, a lot of kids at one time as an AD, but I thought that there was more to it. And once I got out of coaching, and you probably feel like this too, Kevin, your eyes kind of open up a little bit. There's a lot of things you wish you could have gone back and done when you get out of it. And that's why some coaches or teachers or professors take sabbaticals sometimes. They step away because sometimes you can't see the picture when you're inside the frame.
Right.
Sometimes you got to step away. And when I was an AD, I thought to myself, man, there's a lot of things now that I'm on this side of it that I see differently, or I see more clearly. And I wish I could have gone back and I would be a better coach now. And so my thought was, all right, yes, I can impact coaches here at this high school, but maybe I can do a better job of reaching coaches all across the country and helping them be a better coach so that the student athletes they're dealing with become better leaders and better community members one time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. There's a lot of, once again, commonality in that. Same thing for me, leaving to become an AD, and I was AD coach, but I never wished the AD on anybody, regardless of the pay and anything else. But I agree. I think that is once you get out, or I'd always say it's hard to see the label when you're inside the bottle. Same thing, right? Like it's just different. And so I think now both of us are on that path to where, hey, here's some mistakes I've made. Here's some things that I've seen, and I wish I would have known, and speaking of that, like at this point, knowing what you know and having been a coach, what's the best advice you could give coaches at this point, that are starting out? If you go back to, 25-year-old, Jamy Bechler, if you will.
Yeah. And that's really it's an easy answer. Or I should say it's a simple answer. It's maybe not easy to do, but it can't be about you as a coach.
Amen.
And I know it's kind of easy to say, but not easy to do. I was a 27-year-old NCAA head coach, and I had worked my tail off and sacrificed and felt that I had deserved that and felt that I earned it. And I probably had, but I also was trying to prove that I belonged and trying to prove I was smart and trying to prove that, hey, I'm this great leader. Well, a great leader doesn't need to prove that they're a great leader.
Right.
And so it wasn't that I didn't care about our kids, but I did make it about me. Hey, you guys need to do this so that my program's good. So my program's good. So my team looks good. So my plays work. So you guys need to stay out of trouble. So I look good. So I look like I'm a good leader. So yes, I wanted to be a good leader. And yes, I wanted our kids to be good, but it also, the motives were about me still. And I had to learn, quite honestly, I had to get resigned. I had to get fired after 4 years to really realize that I needed to be a coachable coach and I needed to be more of a servant leader. And it wasn't that I didn't care about my kids, but they didn't necessarily know I cared about them. You can say you care about them. And the common saying is kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Well, we say that a lot of times, but what we forget is it's not the second part of that is until you care. It's until they know that you care. And so as a coach, I cared, but they didn't know that. My actions every day did not show that I cared. Even though I did care, my actions were betraying maybe my words. They weren't lining up with my words. And so you asked what I would do differently, or my advice for a young coach is it's got to be about the people. It can't be about you. It's got to be servant leadership. And whether you're on a 10-game losing streak or a 10-game winning streak, it's still about the people. And at the end of the day, very, very, very few of us, just a handful of coaches, get into this profession to be rich and famous. Most of us get into this for good motives, good reasons. We want to give back, or somebody poured into us when we were young. And so we've got to remember that. And, after I got fired, one of the things I did was I taped up at my next jobs. I taped up above my desk on my wall an obituary of my head coach in high school.
That's awesome.
He died when he was 47, but he was one of the main reasons I got into coaching, because of him pouring into me. He was also the first coach that gave me confidence that I could play college basketball. And so I wanted to have his obituary up there. So it was a constant reminder of what someone did for me and what I can then do for players. And so, when I got fired, it wasn't like, it was just all of a sudden 180 and I just flipped that script and I all of a sudden was an amazing coach. It was constantly a learning process. Even my last year of coaching, which I certainly think I was the best, every year I got better as a coach, but I still made mistakes my last year of coaching. It's a constant until you die. Life is a constant learning. It's a constant improvement. It's a game of evaluating and getting better.
I'm somewhat chuckling, not at you, but with you, because this is crazy. These stories, how aligned they are, you and I. And man, I just want to reiterate to anybody that's listening, I appreciate your vulnerability and sharing, Jamy. The actions part really hit me, because it's like, I'd bring you in the next day. And of course, back in the day, we didn't have I had to break down the tape, right? So it took 4 hours to find your 10 shots. And I'd piece them together and bring you in and be like, Jamy, here, you were 2 for 10. Even the 2 you made, these were bad shots. And and I'd do everything. And I'd think, man, I'm pouring into you. Like, what, he'd leave the office, you'd leave the office disappointed. I'm like, what more do you want out of me? And here it's like, I just broke up with my girlfriend, coach. Why don't you talk to me about that? And so anybody that's listening, I know it's almost counterintuitive, right? But that servant mindset is everything. It's funny. I have an INAM next to my bed when I wake up in the quiet time. It's not about me, and it is about others. And so I just want to reiterate what you're saying to all the coaches that are out there, the leaders that are out there. I'm blessed. This area that I live in, Jamy, the cultures, and they pour into their people. They just keep pouring into their people. And then people want to know, like, what is it? Why is it? Well, the product's good. It's not the product, it's the people. And so I love what you're saying there. So once again, I appreciate it. You make this transition to speaker, leadership trainer, executive business coach. Then what was that like for you initially? I mean, Did you see a lot of commonalities in both of those? I think it's been 2.5 months since I've made that leap. So I'd love to hear what you have to say about this, probably personally. Maybe this is just you and I, and nobody's going to listen to this part, but I'd love to hear it.
I often say that my first 2 years of being out on my own, being an entrepreneur, was like being a grad assistant again. It was like being back at Kent State for those 2 years. I was pretty much getting paid about the same too, those first 2 years as a GA and the first 2 years as an entrepreneur. You're not eating ramen noodles and
Taco Bell, are you?
Not now, but those first 2 years, you're the speaking part, the content part, the kind of knowing leadership stuff to a degree, that's the easy part, which is a correlation to coaching. The X's and O's really are easy, when it comes down to it. There may be some nuances of, well, I think that this zone play works better against this zone defense, but for the most part, the X's and O's are pretty easy as a coach. It's the people stuff, it's the discipline stuff, it's the organization part, it's the leadership stuff that's hard. Well, going out as an entrepreneur, being a speaker, being a writer, being a leadership speaker, that kind of stuff is easy. The business part was hard. Understanding how to make a buck, understand how to make money, understand different sources of revenue, understand how to make sales, but then not be too salesy, to establish relationships with people, network with people, but then you still have to ask for a sale because, my kid is weird. He likes to live indoors and wear shoes, and those things cost money, so you have to figure those things out. And that's what I didn't know. So I jumped into this, the deep end of the pool with both feet without really knowing all that stuff. So it's been learning on the fly, but it's been great. People talk about the grind, and, I think all coaches grind and work hard. And so it's not like you're scared of that, but this did definitely take me back to my GA roots of grinding and grinding the film and doing every possible thing you can think of to make something work. And so as an entrepreneur, you joke that some days you're self-employed, some days you're unemployed. Yeah. And so you're just grinding and trying to find different edges and trying to find different ways to number one, make it work. Number one, for your family to make it work, but number two, to continually add value to the people you're trying to reach. I did not leave organized athletics to get into this business so that I can make millions. I got into this business so that I could try to make a difference. And this sounds so, head in the clouds, let's sit in a circle and sing Kumbaya. But I really do believe, our kids that we're dealing with today, those boys and girls we're coaching in high school, they're going to one day be mothers and fathers and husbands and wives and business people and educators and leaders in our communities. Our communities 10 or 15 years from now are good or bad based upon what we do with our kids now. And I know that sounds so weird, when we're trying to figure out this last second play, or we're trying to figure out practice plan. But at the end of the day, these kids are going to grow up to be adults. And so if I could have some kind of an impact, or if I could help coaches do their jobs a little bit better in that, I might be able to help Kevin Bille with his X's and O's, but that's not my purpose. That's not what I'm trying to do. There's lots of videos you can buy for that. There's clinics you can go to. I want to help Kevin Bille to be a better coach and a better leader, so he can impact the kids that he's dealing with, so that one day they can be better adults as well.
Yeah, that's really good though, because to your point, Jamy, like I don't remember a lot of the plays that I ran in high school. I don't remember a lot of the games that I played in college, but I think there's just certain traits that you're alluding to. I know what it means to be disciplined. I know what it means to work hard. I know it, like you talked about earlier, I know what it means to grind and just persevere and be a resilient person when things aren't going your way and you've got that losing streak. And I know what it's like to prepare. There's just certain things that I think those coaches impacted me with, that now, to your point, once again, they're impacting me as a father. They're impacting me as a husband. Like, it's involved in my everyday life of what I'm doing. So I think you've hit the nail on the head there. What would you think,
Kevin, and Kevin, and allow me to go even deeper. Just go just a little bit deeper. And this is an extreme case, but it's something we see in the news if we really look for this kind of stuff. And this happens all the time, but it gets overshadowed, is these kids we're dealing with, what are the decisions that they're making when the rubber meets the road? How are we really, we talk about sports builds character. How are we developing these kids for when they really face adversity in life? And I think I'm from Michigan, and there was a shooting not too long ago in Oxford.
Right.
And a young man, there were 4 individuals that lost their lives. Well, 3 of them were athletes. 3 of them were athletes at that school. One of them was a star running back or a star football player. And he's tried to stop the shooter. Like, that's not something that you weigh a cost benefit analysis to, and you do a spreadsheet and, well, should I do this? Shouldn't I do that? That was a kid. And this is an extreme example. I get that. But here's a kid who obviously, in my opinion, was a great leader or a great teammate, or that was just in him. That was something that people had poured into him. They had developed him. He was a great Tate Meyer. He went to try to help people with no regard for his life. And it didn't matter. He wasn't going to get a scholarship out of that. He wasn't going to get prestige out of that. He just, in a split second, instinct took over. Now, that's an extreme example, and we need to praise those kind of examples. But we see this all the time. Your kids, you got 3 kids at Walmart, and one of them's going to steal something. Are the other 2 going to go along with that? Or, someone gets elbowed in a game. Do they react to that and then pick up a technical foul? Or do they pick up a red card? Those are the kinds of things that, as coaches, if we're not focused on those kinds of things, then number one, our team is never going to be good as it can be. But number 2, our kids are never going to develop into the people that they need to be. So yes, that example in Oxford, I understand is a very extreme example, but who he was came out when it was most needed. Are our kids, when a fight erupts in a locker, in a cafeteria, or a fight erupts on a playing field or a playing court, are they going to act the way that you want them to act? When a kid hits them, or when a referee makes a bad call, are they going to react that way? And I see a lot of coaches that aren't teaching those things. They don't take these examples and apply it to their team and use these opportunities to teach these examples, or use these cautionary tales and say, hey, what would we do in this situation? What would you do in that situation? And so I think we all want kids that would react the right way, but are we teaching them and training them? And in a lot of cases, we'll say, hey, their parents are idiots. Well, if their parents are idiots, where are they getting it from? Who's going to teach them if it's not for us as coaches? And so I apologize, Kevin, for going off on that, but I do think as coaches, and I was guilty of this as a young coach, we get too focused on X's and O's, wins and losses, and we forget that these kids, who are developing them to be good adults one day, if not for us.
Yeah, no, I agree. In terms of the the X's and O's, that's huge. And I think I just read an article this morning, and I'm biased. I got to put my Fighting Irish plug in right now, but just hiring Marcus Freeman, a 35-year-old, in his first head job, being at Notre Dame, and regardless of the fact they haven't won a national championship forever, and these kids don't know. I heard the AD, and well, I didn't hear in the article. They asked him what it was, and it's like, Dabo made the shift, and it's recruiting and it's culture. Well, it had nothing to do with X's and O's, that shift now, and how important that is, into, developing that within the program. And of course you need to have that for the transfer portal and everything else. I get that, but it's just crazy to think that here we are, and they didn't even think about the X's and O's. They know he's a defensive guy. Don't get me wrong, but it was like, hey, we got him because he can connect and he can create a culture. And so I think that shift is occurring more than it has. What in your opinion makes the best leader, Jamy?
Yeah, I would give you a couple things. I know you said, what's the best thing?
No, a couple would be fine.
I would say that the 2 things that jump right off the page to me is, can you make other people better? Help make other people better? And are you a servant leader? And I think those 2 things go hand in hand. I think you have to be a servant leader. And that doesn't mean that, I once heard a quote that said, humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. And I think that we need to do that as servant leaders. We need to think of ourselves less, not think less of ourselves. I mean, we can have tremendous confidence as a leader, tremendous confidence as a coach, but we have to think of others. Think of our people. How can we make those people better? What are we doing to make that 15th person? The kid at the end of the bench, whose best friend is the athletic trainer in the water cooler. What are we doing to add value in their lives to help them be significant, to find significance in life, to feel good about themselves? What are we doing to help them be a better basketball player, or football player, or soccer player?
Yeah.
What are we doing to make the people around us better? Are we empowering people, or are we the leader that just wants good, compliant followers? Come on. Why can't you guys just do what I'm telling you to do?
Yeah,
just
right.
do what I say to do, and we're going to be good if you just do what I tell you to do. Well, instead of trying to get compliant followers, why don't you try to empower people and develop other leaders, so that when Coach Bille's not around or Coach Beckler's not around, you know what? Things still get done right. And people are still doing what they're supposed to do, and they're helping others do what they're supposed to do as well, because you've created this culture where Coach Bille doesn't have to be there all the time. The captain doesn't have to be there all the time, because they've empowered others. They've developed those leaders, but then they've empowered them to do what's right and to influence people positively.
What about on the flip side now with what you're doing? What would you say are some things that you're seeing consistently with poor leaders, if they're struggling at, or what are leaders not doing well? I think you probably alluded to some in your last answer there, but if you have anything else, or could go a little deeper with that.
Yeah, there's I think a misconception out there that you're a leader because you have a position, or you have a title, or you have status. I'm a leader because I'm the coach. I have this business card. You have to call me coach. Well, yeah, you have a position of leadership, but that doesn't mean you're inspiring anybody. As a player, there's so many players in high school, so many players in colleges that think they're good leaders, and even their coaches think they're good leaders just because they've been elected captain, or because they're a senior, or because they're a star, because they can run faster or jump higher. They have this status that then makes them a leader. And yes, they could have charisma. Yes, they could be inspirational because of that stuff. But at the end of the day, you don't influence people and inspire people unless people believe in you, unless they trust you, they respect you, they think that you can help them get from where they are to where they need to be. And that could be, a little sophomore on your team. Yeah, I might do what Kevin says because he's the star player, he's the captain. I might do what Kevin says, but I'm not going to like it. And so my heart's not all going to be in it. Or I don't believe Kevin really cares about me because I'm just a little sophomore. Now, if that kid really believes that Kevin cares about him, now all of a sudden, man, I'm going to do anything for this kid. I literally yesterday signed a couple books to send out to one of my former players. His name is Chaz Smoot. All right. I'm going to send a shout out to Chaz Smoot. He was an All-American at Anderson University. And Chaz was one of the best leaders in the locker room that I've ever been around. He didn't make all the great choices all the time. He made some poor choices at different times, but every single kid that I am aware of on that team felt that Chaz was their best friend. Chaz had this way with people, and he inspired people. And so you might be a freshman or a JV player on this team, and you still listen to Chaz, not because he was this big dude and not because he was an All-American, but because you felt like he was your friend. He inspired people. And I just autographed some books to send out to him just yesterday.
That's cool.
But I say all that because we see this a lot in high schools and college or whatever. Kids aren't inspiring their teammates necessarily because the coaches aren't teaching them how to do that. The coaches aren't helping them to do that. Coaches aren't developing leaders. And let's look at the flip side. Every coach listening to this is going to have some drama this year or their next season. They're going to have some drama. Now, the better cultures, the better teams are going to have less drama, but everyone's going to have drama or issues or metaphorical fires in their locker room, metaphorical fires in the back of the bus or in the cafeteria. Well, are you equipping your players with fire extinguishers? Are you giving them fire extinguishers and showing them how to use that? Or are you just essentially letting them have lighter fluid? Are they making these fires bigger, letting them escalate, or are they trying to put these fires out? And most of us as coaches, and I was a victim to this as well. We just assumed, oh, well, he's a good kid. He doesn't get in trouble. He gets good grades. He doesn't get thrown into jail. And he says, yes, sir, no, sir. So he's a good kid. He'll know how to handle drama. He doesn't know how to handle drama. He doesn't know how to work with his teammates when they're arguing or when they have issues. We just assume that these kids are going to be able to deal with these issues in the locker room. And so we essentially leave them with their lighter fluid, and these fires get bigger and bigger and bigger. We have to do a better job of developing players, not necessarily to be coaches, not to be an extension of the coach, but just helping them understand how they can maybe remind their teammates of what our goals are, remind their teammates about what our focus should be, help them to understand how to conversate and talk with their teammates and just be a better teammate in the locker room. Yeah.
And it's like, I'm 44 years old. I'm still dealing with the same issues and trying to develop those and work on them myself, Jamy. And it's funny because you look back and it's like they're 18 or 22 and you're wondering why they don't get it yet. I'll go back to something you said earlier. It's just a process, and we're all going to try to reach the best version of ourselves and never get there. What about you here? I mean, how are some ways that you're growing as a leader? I think you're a pretty big reader, and obviously we're going to talk about books here in a second, but what are some ways that you're growing yourself?
Yeah. Every time we release a podcast episode, every time we write an article or write a book, I'm pretty much speaking to myself. I might say, hey, Kevin, you need to think about this, or coaches, you need to think about this, but I'm really talking about myself. Even if I'm not a coach anymore, I'm not coaching basketball, I'm not calling a play. I still deal with this with my son. I still deal with this with my wife. I still deal with this with interactions I have with other people. I still have to be a better leader. I still have to be a better man. I need to step up and be more tolerant, or be more loving, or be more understanding, or be a better listener, or, all these kinds of things. The things that I'm saying, I'm not saying it because I figured it out and I'm perfect at it. I'm saying it as a reminder to me, and I'm hoping that it helps other people. So that's how I grow. Or I'm constantly being reminded that I'm not where I'm at. And also my wife keeps me grounded too, because sometimes she'll hear me speak or read an article and she'll be like, you actually listen to yourself? Maybe you really ought to take your advice there, right, because you're not doing that at home. And I'm like, oh, why did you listen to that podcast episode?
You have other than your own here, do you have any book plugs for the listeners? Maybe something you've read recently, or just maybe all-time favorites?
I'll give you my all-time favorites, and these are old books in a way, but How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's probably like 100 years old. I don't know when it came out. I think the 1930s. That's by Carnegie, Dale Carnegie. How to Win Friends and Influence People, and such an amazing book about understanding people, and it's not about you. And obviously the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is always good. Mm-hmm. From a networking standpoint, there's a book that is underrated or not a lot of people know about, but Harvey Mackay wrote it, and it's called Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. And it's a great networking book, or how to build relationships type book. Build a relationship before you have to make an ask. And it's a sales book to a degree, but as coaches, sometimes we ask our players to do something without building up much credit in that emotional bank account. And certainly with parents, we sometimes have to have a tough conversation with parents without having a strong bond with parents. And anytime you're going to have a tough conversation, you need a strong bond to withstand that tough conversation. And we don't dig our well before we're thirsty. We don't fix our roof when it's sunny outside, essentially. Yeah, it's good. So those are a couple of my favorites. But any John Gordon, any John Maxwell book, I would, I read as many John Gordon and John Maxwell books as I can. And those two do put out a lot. So, you can find books. I mean, it seems like every day they're coming out with a new book.
Well, let's talk about books excuse me, in terms of you as the author here, you just released one a couple weeks ago on November 24th called The Captain. Tell us a little bit why there you go. I've got my PDF copy, so I appreciate that. That was good. Why did you write this book, Jamy?
Yeah, we kind of already addressed it a little bit, but I see that there's a big need out there for an understanding that it's not just about your status, it's not just about your talent, it's not just about your position or your power that makes you a good leader, that helps you inspire others. That might give you a bigger platform, but people are inspired by people that they trust, that they respect, that have earned the right to inspire and influence other people. And so we wrote this book primarily, it can work for anybody, but primarily for those people that are talented, for those people that are in a leadership position, like a coach, like a captain on a team, or a starter on a team. It's not just about you're talented. That doesn't necessarily make your team better, because most of us are in a team sport. Especially in the book is about a football team. Definitely in football, that's a major team sport. But most of us are in team sports, and we see this all the time. Even in baseball, Bryce Harper was the MVP last year, but the Phillies didn't make the playoffs. Now, the Phillies some could argue that the Phillies were a better team because of Bryce Harper, but the fact of the matter is he's still the best player in baseball, but the team didn't make the playoffs.
Right.
So there's more to it than just talent. And so I wanted to write a book that kind of talked about that. Whereas my last book, The Bus Trip, that was centered around the theme of everybody can be a leader. It doesn't matter what your role is, what your status is on the team. Every single person can be a leader, because there's more people on a team that aren't a captain. And so your culture is made by all those other people, even more so than your 2 or 3 captains. So I wrote that book previously. So this time I wanted to write a book about captains.
And I don't want to give away the book, obviously, but why does it take so long for people in general to truly understand what leadership is all about?
Well, we see bad examples of it all the time, because we mistakenly call our politicians leaders. And oftentimes we mistake, we say they're our leaders, or the leader of the free world, or we throw around the word leader, but we attach it to positions way too often. And we do this all the time. So I do think that there's a misguided notion of what leaders are. Certainly, if you're in a position of leadership, you are a leader to some degree. But we see these bad examples of leaders, people that that have agendas, that are not looking out for our best interests. We see this in high schools. We see this with school boards. We see this with principals. We see this with coaches, that it's not about, doing what's right. It's about getting my way. I want to be right. I want my way. I want to look good. I'm trying to cover my butt, so to speak. So we see these examples of leadership where people are being people. And they're flawed. People are flawed. Humans are flawed. And I don't begrudge Kevin if he's a bad leader. He's just a human. And he's, we're like that. And so I think the more that there's people out there that are emphasizing that there's another way, that you don't have to just be power hungry. That's one you asked about. One of the biggest mistakes people make as a leader or a captain or whatever, is that they're power hungry. They let the power go to their heads. They thirst for power. Hey, I'm in charge. I don't need to put out the cones before practice, or I don't need to carry the bags because I'm the captain. Well, maybe if you did that, if you modeled what you want everybody else to do, then other people would be more inspired to do it. And I was working with the Toronto Raptors a few years ago. And in the off season, we had this mini camp out in LA, and I'm out there, and it's just the players, the coaches, and then me. So there's not like support staff, there's not managers, that kind of stuff. So we arrive at the gym, and we get out of this van, and there's about probably 7 or 8 players mulling around, and there's 3 bags of balls, towels, whatever. And, they're doing the quick math, and they understand if they wait just long enough, there's more players than there are bags. And so, you can almost see the wheels are spinning, that, well, I don't have to carry a bag. And it seemed like forever, but after just like 2 seconds, Fred VanVleet comes into the middle, and he picks up 2 bags by himself and he says, screw this, let's go get better. And he just starts walking toward the gym. Okay. That then gets someone else to pick up a bag and they follow suit. And that's the kind of stuff that a great teammate, a great leader is going to do. It doesn't matter who you are. Hey, we got a job to do and we're going to get this done. And we're not going to worry about, how does this make me look? We're not going to worry about the pecking order, who's where on an organizational flow chart. You know what? If there's trash that needs to be picked up and I'm the superintendent, then by golly, I'm going to pick that stinking piece of trash up and not, get on my radio and call the custodian and say that there's trash. Now there's certain things that you can't do sometimes, or you're on the way to a meeting, but if you're a coach, you can pick up the cones, you can pick up stuff. If you're a starter, you can do that kind of stuff. You can carry bags. And so I think there's that misguided notion that if you have this certain status or power, that you don't have to do things. And I would say it's actually the flip. It's the reverse. Because you have this power and platform, you should be the first ones doing these kinds of things because people will see that. If that little freshman that nobody cares about is the one carrying the bag, how did that just make your team better? Nobody cares about that. They don't have a platform. They don't have power.
Well, and I'd go back to some of that humility that you touched on earlier, right? And as a leader, are you willing to do the things that you're asking your people to do? And yeah, there might be some physical restraints or whatnot, but I think overall that's what you're getting at. I want to touch a little bit later on just kind of where we can find you and everything, but let's focus on the books though really quick so we don't forget. Where can people get the books at, Jamy? I know all of them that you've written, especially this new one, please.
Probably the best place is just coachbeckler.com. They're all on Amazon, certainly, but my website, coachbeckler.com. If they're on Twitter, they can go to @coachbeckler and find that stuff as well. But we've got 4 books out. 2 are nonfiction, 2 are fiction. And so we've tried to give a little bit for everybody. They are leadership, sports related. And so each one is slightly different, but they're all based on, how can you be a better leader? And a lot of it is based upon my influence from John Wooden as a coach and John Maxwell as a leader. And then writing wise, I wish I was as good of a writer as John Gordon. So I guess there's a bunch of Johns in my life that have influenced me. But, it's, we're all a sum total of those people that have poured into us and our experiences. And so I've been around a lot of great leaders. Certainly we've all been around people that maybe fell short a little bit, but I've been around people that really were unselfish, people that really wanted to help others, that wanted to inspire and influence in a positive way and make a difference. And so that's kind of rubbed off on me. And even though, I admit that I wasn't a very good coach when I first started out, it wasn't that I didn't care. It was just, I was too into my career. I wanted to be a really good coach and climb that ladder. And even if I stayed where I was at, I was going to climb the ladder of success, even if it wasn't climb the ladder for jobs. Right. And so I just fell into that trap. And we all do that. Players, you might be a 17-year-old on your sports team. You're trying to climb that ladder. You want to look good. You want to be the person whose name is talked about, who's all conference. You don't want to look bad in front of your teammates. You don't want to look bad in front of the crowd. And so we're all guilty of having that ego to a degree, but the best leaders, the people that are going to be the best teammates are the people that are going to make others better and understand, hey, I might not get the glory, but that's okay because we are going to get the glory.
For sure. Hey, let's go rapid fire to finish here. 3-pointers. I'm going to, I'll get into the paint, kick it to you in the corner, and you can hoist up some shots here to finish up. All right. And if you got to go a little bit longer, go ahead. But number one, if people could grab hold of, if there's one thing you just want them to focus on from this talk and grab hold on to it, Jamy, what would you want that one thing to be?
It's not about you.
It's good. Number two, if Jamy could have come over here today and been behind the mic and been Kevin and asked a question of you, what question would have you asked that I did not ask today?
Oh, mercy. That's always a great question. I never have a good answer when I'm asked that. Yeah, I know this is great podcast viewing, great podcast listening when there's a pause, but I probably would talk a little, I would have asked me a little bit more about my mistakes as a coach. Cause I think everything and everybody either has or is a great example or has or is a cautionary tale.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes sorry, this isn't a quick hitter with my answer. Right. I spoke a few years at a conference and the topic was, I think it was called like #oops, how to take a team from first to worst. And yes, you heard that right. How to take a team from first to worst. I think when we go to clinics and conferences, we hear all these good things. This is how you build a program. This is how this is a great play against this, or, it's all the positive stuff, which good. I'm all about positive. But sometimes we don't hear these cautionary tales, and certainly we don't always learn from them. Life is too short to make all the mistakes on our own. We need help in that area. And so we can learn from others. And so this topic was, I think it was 6 or 7 things that I did when I inherited a team that was in first place and we ended up in last place.
That's great.
After my first year. And you can flip those around and say, if I'd done those things well, we would have had a better team. But oftentimes we make mistakes, we screw up, and other people can learn from those things. And that builds or ruins your culture just as much as these are the 6 things you need to do. Well, these are the 6 things you better make sure you don't do. And so learning from other people.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Hey, finally, number 3, good stuff's the name of this. Anything right now, just that you can give us some good stuff in closing that maybe you feel is appropriate?
Well, one thing that's on my mind, and I think we can do better as leaders and coaches with this, is listening and seeing other perspectives. And this falls right in line with being a good leader. Is oftentimes, us as in our 40s, we see things differently than our 16-year-old athletes do.
Mm-hmm.
We may not understand where they're coming from, but we need to understand where they're coming from if we're going to reach them, if we're going to have an impact and maximize their potential. But I would even say Jamy Bechler as a 16-year-old is different than a 16-year-old I might coach today. So there's always a different perspective, a different point of view, because things change. It doesn't mean that things are worse or better today than they were in the past, but things are different. And we have to understand, do a better job of listening, learn to listen, listen to learn. We have to do a better job of listening to our athletes, of listening to people, of being observant, of being self-aware and understanding what's going on. We see this on social media. We see this in politics. We see this in our relationships, that we shut people down because we don't understand where they're coming from. It doesn't mean that we have to agree with them, but we don't understand them. And if you don't understand them, you won't even know what makes them tick. And if you don't know what makes them tick, you'll never know how to get the best out of them. You mentioned earlier, and it was a great point, you bring a kid in, you watch film, they go 2 for 10, and you talk about those things. And really the main reason they went 2 for 10 was because they just broke up with their girlfriend or they're struggling with something, but you never took the time to understand where they're at, to connect with them from that standpoint. And I think if we could do that, we would be a better leader. Therefore, we would influence people better and people would be more inspired. If just simply we understand people better and take time to understand what makes people tick. Good.
3 for 3. Boom. Knocked them down there. Good to go. Hey, website, once again, jamybechler.com, correct? Man, I would tell people to go on there. Just, you have got resources galore. Everything's as organized, all get out. I mean, people can even find out what mic you're using. I love it. You've got it. You've got it there. I don't even have to ask you about your social media either. It's right there on the banner. So you've taken care of that. Let's talk about real quick your podcast. Success is a Choice. What's it about? Why should we listen? Just kind of what we're going to take away from that.
Success is a Choice is a bad business model from a podcast standpoint, to be blatantly honest, because we don't have a niche. We don't have a target market. Most of the people that listen are people like you, or they're coaches, educators, leaders. They work with youth, but our podcast is all across the board. I think one week we interviewed a pastor. The next week we interviewed like a pussycat doll. Then we have Phil Hellmuth, who's a poker champion. Clark Kellogg. We have sports people, we have business people, Shark Tank people, entertainers. We're all across the board. with that. But we also do little small segments as well. 2-minute drill. We do where my thoughts on in 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. We do motivational minute. We do some leadership now stuff where I talk for about 5 minutes on a topic in leadership and sports, where leadership and sports collide. That's relevant right now. So we go all across the board because I want to give something for everybody. So I'm not trying to just be a basketball podcast. I'm not trying to be just a business podcast. That's why I say it's a bad business model, because people would say you need to have a niche and an absolute target market. I didn't want to do that when I started, and I still don't want to do that. I want to give a little bit. If you only want to listen for 2 minutes, well, then we got something for you. If you like the long form interviews, we've got something for you. So we try to go all across the board, and it's been fun. It's been fun. It's a nice little hobby, and what we try to do, we try not to be controversial, but we try to give lots of nuggets and insights about how people, when we interview people, how they were successful, what they've learned, some of the mistakes they've made, and what we can learn from those. And ultimately, most things come back to, I believe firmly that success is a choice, that what we are and who we are tomorrow is made up of the choices we make today. And that we're constantly building habits, and those habits make us who we are. And so we can choose those kinds of things. We can choose who we want to be for the most part.
Yeah. That's good. No, that's good. What, who have I had on, who have I not had on the podcast here that I need to?
Oh, well, you've had some great guests. And I mentioned Clark Kellogg. He's one of my favorite guests of all time, but he's also one of my favorite people. Yeah. He's so wise. When I talked about understanding and listening a little bit earlier, he's somebody that doesn't just knee-jerk react to, all right, this happened, and so I'm naturally going to yell about this or have this opinion. No, you know what? I want to see what's going on. I want to understand this situation. Let's talk about this. Let's be wise about this. And I think we can learn from that. And in the same way, I had a gentleman, many of your listeners will know, Bill Curry, former coach at Alabama. He played for the Green Bay Packers, but Bill Curry, another person that's very wise. He's very calculated in what he says, and he likes to see other perspectives. He likes to understand people. Those are the people that I really like are and those are two that I would highly recommend that I don't think you've had on your podcast that are very wise, and they're in two different sports.
Cool. Thank you very much. Well, hey, Jamy, this was wonderful, man. I think you're clearly doing what you're meant to do. You talk about that word impact over and over again. Definitely resonates with me. And so it's no secret that you've got a lot of passion for making other people better. So I appreciate what you're doing, how you're going about it, and just spending some time here with us today. It's been great getting to know you more. I look forward to staying in touch, and I hope you and yours have a great Christmas here. So thank you once again.
I appreciate it, Kevin, and keep up the good work that you're doing as well.
We'll do that. Hey, everybody, as always, touch base with me, goodstuffkevin@gmail.com. Head on over to that website of his, find some resources for you, buy a book maybe for a stocking stuffer, and even get on over to his podcast. Jamy's had some wonderful guests. And thank you once again for being with us. And until next time, good stuff.